last two videos, we looked at the evidence to suggest that one of the main reasons that older drivers get a bad press is because there is no satisfactory widespread service for concerned family members to access when safety is questioned. Therefore, the headline hitting collisions that give older drivers a bad reputation in general continue to happen. Every now and again, you will see that an older driver has shot through a brick wall due to pedal confusion or driven the wrong way down a motorway. These are not events you can easily pin on older drivers as such, but far more likely to be due to a cognitive medical condition. So why are we allowing these drivers to go unnoticed despite the warning signs that are frequently mentioned after the event? Family members are our early warning system and they need much more support from road safety professionals who understand about balancing our road safety and personal welfare needs. They need guidance on their own personal circumstances and access to a driving assessment that takes place in the driver's own car and on local familiar roads, not solely one many miles away at an assessment centre and in an unfamiliar car. Often, these safety concerns by family members go hand in hand with concerns linked to cognitive impairment, such as fading memory and increased confusion.
Your lovely Ian was killed outright by a batty old bird of 70 driving up the road the wrong way round.
Well, people are driving 80s, 90s, and I don't disagree with it. A lot of people are compass mentors and perfectly safe on the roads. But the day they're not safe, who tells them?
So let's have a look at the organisations that the family members can contact at present. Number one, the doctor. It's probably true to point out that doctors in general would rather not get involved with a question of driving. It's not their area of expertise, and I can fully understand that. After all, they almost never get to see the patient behind the wheel. Asking a GP about fitness to drive is an almost impossible request of them when dementia is involved, given the guidelines from DVLA that they have to work under. They could refer to a consultant in older person's mental health, which may escalate the issue, for example, by providing a diagnosis, but this is still a long way from getting the problem resolved. Number two, the DVLA, the licensing authority in the UK are the only ones, other than the law court system, who can withdraw someone's license to drive. But their procedures are often so slow and complicated that it's likely that the driver will be waiting many weeks or months for a decision from them on that. Mostly during this time, the driver is allowed to continue unless a doctor says don't drive, and doctors are very reluctant to do that in many cases. So that's an unsafe driver being allowed to continue to drive for many weeks or even months after the safety was first questioned. Number three, we got driving mobility. Now, on the face of it, this organisation is the most obvious one to signpost concerned family members to, because they combine medical expertise with driving knowledge to make a ruling directly on fitness to drive. The big problem here that family members face is that the nature of this service, for very valid reasons, is such that most older drivers find the assessment too much of a daunting prospect to agree to get involved in it. Not being able to use their own car and being assessed by an occupational therapist and a driving assessor whilst driving on roads that they are not familiar with would make most drivers anxious. Imagine what that prospect is like for a driver with dementia, then, particularly if their whole independence, enjoyment of life depends on that outcome. And that's without the fact that the driver is preceded by various reaction, eyesight, and cognitive tests, not to mention the fact that it could cost up to £300 for the privilege. So you can begin to see why only a small proportion of family members go down that route. Number 4, we have local driving assessment providers. Standard risk assessment in the driver's own vehicle may be available from local authorities, IAM Road Smart on a national basis, or a local driving school. However, almost all use assessors who have little or no experience of understanding how cognitive impairment affects driving. And even if they do, they are instructed to refer any driver with a cognitive impairment over to driving mobility. That's fine if the driver actually follows through with that referral, but the problem is most don't. And then what do they do next? Just move on to the next one? That doesn't solve anything. And what about those drivers who have a cognitive impairment diagnosis but don't disclose it, or indeed have an undiagnosed dementia? How are unqualified ADIs supposed to risk assess their driving? Refresher training is unlikely to work, nor is just reporting some concerns with the driving for unknown reasons. The problem is the dogged insistence that the current system of only driving mobility having the ability to spot the danger signs is holding casualty reduction back, and we should at least be discussing alternative approaches. After all, this is a road safety issue, and effectively banning driving instructors from even learning about what to look out for is a disservice to road safety, in my opinion. In fact, DVLA themselves asked the following question on their CG1 form, which is what drivers with dementia use to notify them. Have you had an on-road driving assessment in the last 12 months? If yes, and you have a copy, please enclose it with this form. How is anyone able to get a report if there are no driving assessors able or willing to help? Any driver that has cognitive problems is legally required to notify DVLA, but not all do so. In fact, there are many drivers on our roads who are driving with undiagnosed dementia because the person refuses to acknowledge the problem or see their doctor. So if no one knows about the condition other than family members' suspicions and their safety concerns, who is qualified to risk assess this and guide the family? Now, contrary to popular opinion, spotting the basic signs of how dementia can potentially affect driving is not exclusive to occupational therapists and other medical professionals. Some of the more obvious signs are easily spotted by a suitably qualified road safety professional and are examples as follows. Number 1, consistently poor road positioning and problems using car parks can point to a spatial awareness deficit, and this is strongly linked to cognitive impairment. Intense and fixed staring at the road ahead or ease of distraction can point to concentration difficulties and focus difficulties, and again, this can be linked to cognitive impairment. Number 3, safely being able to drive on very familiar roads, but safety issues on the more complex situations, such as multi-lane roundabouts. This can mean multitasking or task switching is becoming more difficult, and again, can be linked to cognitive impairment. Number 4, getting lost on what should be a familiar route, which can lead to stress and higher risk. Getting lost itself will not necessarily mean danger, but it depends on how that person responds to that. Now, I should mention that in a small percentage of cases, DVLA may direct the driver to go directly for a fitness to drive assessment at an assessment centre. In this case, the driver has little option than to be assessed there and would not be charged. However, this outcome is comparatively unlikely, probably due to funding and resource issues, but may also have something to do with recognising that older drivers are generally very sensible by modifying their driving to match their decreases in skills. The big issue is when sufficient insight of the risk that driving poses is lost due to the dementia. We need to identify this before it happens, and again, a suitably qualified ADI can be on hand to do this after sufficient interaction with the driver and the family. So why do those that have the greatest influence in road safety policy and almost all providers of standard driver assessment refuse to acknowledge the essential part of the process that driving assessors can play? Let's be clear, the type of catastrophic incidents such as pedal confusion and driving the wrong way on the motorway, as well as many junction collisions, do not define the aging process alone, but are far more representative of an imperfect system that doesn't help a family member when they express concerns and relies largely on the opinion of a GP who has never seen the driver behind the wheel. Now, at the time of this recording, I've just started actually to offer my many years of experience to guide other driving assessors to be able to understand what's needed so that they can play an important part here. Already over 100 approved driving instructors who have previously completed the Road Safety GB Aging Driver course have signed up. But even if many more driving assessors signed up for this type of course, it can only do a certain amount. What's needed is for much wider acceptance that there may be a role to play by driving instructors to help these family members who are noticing unsafe drivers at the earlier stage. And for those who are against this type of involvement, I will mention the Hampshire scheme that I ran for many years. Since starting in the early 2000s, this scheme has assessed more than 4,000 drivers with a cognitive impairment, mostly those with a diagnosed dementia. And another 12,000 drivers with no declared medical condition have also gone through the scheme. And I can tell you, as someone who has been involved with a huge number of these in terms of monitoring feedback from the assessors, etc., there is a very distinct difference between the two sets in many cases. Most local authority driving assessments that strive to cut road casualties have little effect because they mainly attract drivers who are already interested in road safety. And if they do come across an unsafe driver, all they can do really in most instances is recommend refresher training. The Hampshire scheme, however, can and does frequently take unsafe drivers off the road by working with family members, doctors and the DVLA. And whereas no other driving assessment scheme that I know of has ever been able to link road casualties to the provision of a driver assessment, the Hampshire scheme has demonstrated sufficiently strong evidence of a fall in road casualties in the area of operation to be awarded a Prince Michael International Road Safety Award. Let's face it, it's not rocket science. If you interact with those most likely to cause a safety issue and remove those that pose the highest risk from our roads, there's a far greater chance that crashes will be prevented. So the question I will leave you with is, what is stopping other areas of the UK, apart from Hampshire, from at least considering training their own local assessors in this regard? Not easy, I know, but there again, all the hard work has been done over many years through the Hampshire scheme. Isn't it worth making the move away from the dogged approach that exists currently in order to increase the chances of saving more lives and moving away from those occasional headline hitting catastrophic collisions that all older drivers get associated with.